At first glance, the Pine Hollow Trail is nothing, just a passage through thick, high-country lodgepole pines and damp cedar groves. The kind of place you could walk past 1,000 times and never register. There's no signage. No "you are here" post. No mile markers or boot-scratched benches. Just a dip in the undergrowth. Flattened pine needles. A smooth bend that parts the woods like the most natural thing in the world. But that bend, it wasn't always there. It showed up for the first time on satellite maps in 2010, a faint crease of a path that cut through dense forestry land near the edge of Pine Hollow's federal boundary. At first, it seemed like a glitch, a compression error. The map editors dismissed it, until the path began showing up in high-res terrain data, segmenting ash soil and low brush in patterns too deliberate to be random. But the confusion wasn't just digital. The land around that segment had been surveyed before, many times, going back to the 1970s. None of those logs included any such trail. Older maps showed solid tree growth across the area. And even among locals, lifelong hunters, trappers, and loggers, nobody remembered walking anything like it. And yet, there it was. Suddenly clear. Suddenly maintained. Walkers who noticed it said the trail felt too good. Neat. Carved without jagged roots or drainage ruts. No wildlife crossings. No fallen logs. Just a path that looked like someone swept it every morning in expectation of visitors. Rangers assumed it was an old logging cut left to overgrow. But no one ever found saw scars on the stumps nearby. No rusted drums. No axle marks from skidders. It didn't add up. And no service records claimed maintenance for that section after 1979. Of course, not everyone would have called it strange. These are just woods, after all. But certain things started happening. Compasses spun. GPS units flashed, then froze. Tree rings aged differently. And the few wildlife cams placed along the entry corridor, they all recorded a strange commonality. A few seconds of steady footage, then static. Repeated attempts to reconfigure the trail on digital maps failed. The moment you panned too far east, the data stuttered, or the UI sent you back to the closest road, as if refusing to draw what it couldn't understand. If you asked locals, they spoke in contradictions. Some said they'd hiked it years earlier, before maps tracked it, despite having no memory of where it went. Others refused to speak directly, instead offering fragments. Whatever lives on that stretch doesn't like to be remembered. Some paths take real good notes of who walks them. Don't walk past Second Bend. If you hear it breathing, you went too far. It counts. That last word, counts, comes up often. In stories, in scribbled trail warnings, in the few deleted blog threads still archived on forums from 2016. It's the only concrete verb hikers agree on. The trail counts things. Some said it counted footsteps. Some believed it counted breath. Others were sure, completely sure, it remembered names. Of course, not all stories ended in vanishing. That would have made it easy to ignore. Most returned no worse than when they walked in. Some confused, others quiet. One or two wouldn't talk much afterward at all, just left Pine Hollow entirely and never looked back. But it's the difference that stands out. Everyone who walks it, just far enough that the wind stops and the quiet grows dense. Everyone reports the same sensation, that the forest has paused. Not wind dying down, not wildlife shying away. But a pause, deliberate, like waiting. There's the pressure behind the ears, the sense of listening not from above, but from beneath. A kind of silence too thick to walk normally through. It slows your pace. Not fear, awareness. And in that pause, you feel it begin to measure. That's when hikers report the first signs. A flag tied to a branch gone when you turn around. Voice memos glitching when played back. Markers carved into bark that appear somewhere ahead before you've made them. A red sleeve tucked just so between two stones. An old tree you've already passed once, now ahead of you again. The trail, they say, folds. Not like a loop. A loop would make sense. This folds like paper being pleated, brought back over itself repeatedly. It folds you through it. And the marks left in return? Pressed moss. Circle-shaped gaps in lichen. Rocks that feel cold to the touch even on warm days. Places where animals will not step. A wildlife tracker once set bait inside the mouth of the trail's entrance. Game cam. Deer path aligned. Nothing came near it. Even small ground dwellers, foxes, raccoons, possums, diverted around. As though taught. And in all the footage, exactly 3 frames before the cam cut out, a red blur passed. No shape, just scene warping tone. Same color every time. Flannel red, tape red, Ranger red. The Ranger service removed the cameras shortly after. Some say it's a coincidence, a trick of wind, optical layering, overactive imaginations projected onto a simple tree break. But then you hear about the people who still go missing now and then near Pine Hollow. Not all directly from the trail, not always under similar weather or skill level, but the pattern persists, not in disappearance, but in details. Walkers frequently report an urge to keep moving forward, never backward. Compasses spinning, a sudden hush, a second cairn where there was just one. The color red, out of place. Patterns, small ones, repeated across years, hikers, rangers, seasons. An ecology of behavior that you can choose to ignore until you're on it. And once you're on it deep enough, time feels wrong. Not completely out of sequence, just off. Like waking from a dream that kept the wrong hours. Like blinking only once, but finding full daylight gone. And that's when the final rule rides the rumor mill. If you've been counted, don't return. Some believe those words are metaphor. But not everyone. This story wouldn't matter much, just another Oregon ghost trail, unless someone tried to map it. Someone who never came back. David Travers, part-time cartographer, last seen just north of Pine Hollow. Left a note at the ranger station. Unnamed alignment. Maybe trail. Flagging route now. Then silence. No body. No gear. Just a frostcake truck. And a hand-drawn map, unfinished. Which brings us to his son, Elliot Travers, and the story of the time the trail remembered him. Elliot Travers wasn't a thrill seeker. He hiked often, but he wasn't filming content or bagging peaks. No drone footage. No summit selfies. Just boots, a worn canvas duffel, a waterproof field journal, and his father's last incomplete map. It had been nearly 5 months since David Travers, a part-time cartographer and full-time obsessive of off-grid trails, vanished without a ripple of local news coverage. He had a history of walking the woods solo, always with care, always with backups, logs, coordinates left behind. This time was no different. Except, this time, he never came back. He'd filed his route plan at the ranger station, tracking possible trail realignment near Pine Hollow sector. Unnamed corridor east of Old Road 17. Will mark. The markers were never recovered. The last satellite ping came from just north of the bend where the unmarked trail appears like a wound in the earth. When rangers found his truck 5 days later, frosted, locked, undisturbed, they assumed the worst. Only the car seemed off. Its interior was clean. His glove box held a fresh navigation sketch in faint graphite, a partial path curling into nothing. The pencil line ended mid-arc. Elliot had read the file twice. Then put his father's journal in his coat, packed, and made for the mountain. He didn't return for closure or answers. He returned because the silence around the place was loud enough to feel rehearsed. Someone, or something, was maintaining that quiet. He arrived just before dusk. The ranger cabin stood as it had for 70 years, dry sink, warped floors, faded map tacked above a desk. That same map, Elliot noted, conveniently cropped out the section his father was last headed toward. It depicted the old logging road, but made almost an effort to deny the trail's existence. That omission stuck in his mind. He dropped his bag beside the bunk. On top, he placed his gear. 2 GPS units. One new, one his father's. A compass, mechanical, not digital. A field microphone. Red flagging tape. And the journal, half full, riddled with shorthand, overlays, and matchstick sketches of tree shapes and soil patterns. Near the back, a note underlined in shaky hand. Trail breathes at night. Not wind, just breath. He read it twice. Tried not to let it settle in. Considered it poetic. A flourish. Still, he left the gas lantern on that night, even as he closed his eyes. Every creak of the wood seemed precise. Every groan in the beams above him felt less like age, and more like settling underweight. Around 3 a.m., a single thud hit the back wall. Not loud, not frantic. Just there. Elliot stared at the plank ceiling until the light turned gray with pre-dawn. By 7:12 a.m., he was walking the trail alone. The air changed first. Cooler, like a natural breath being drawn in. He checked both GPS units. The newer one still worked. The older one took 10 seconds to locate, then powered off without warning. His compass needle began drifting gently, still pointing north, but not with confidence. Not anchored. The trail itself was almost beautiful in form. Soft switchbacks where sharp drops should have been. Manicured edges. Moss that grew to the path, but never over it. Pine needles that lay flat like freshly combed fur. In the first 50 feet, he heard birdsong. By 60 feet, nothing. The silence arrived like a curtain drop. Sudden, audible only in contrast. He paused, tied his first flag, red tape, onto a low-hanging branch. The motion calmed him, made it real, functional, like procedure gave him power. He walked 20 more minutes, gained about 80 feet in elevation, took 3 junctionless turns, each subtle, natural. He left his second flag just past a long-barked fir that leaned westward into deeper brush. When he finally stopped to check distance on his GPS, the battery flickered. The reading blinked gibberish for a frame and then reset the screen. Unable to connect satellite. Just like his father's unit. Elliot turned back to verify his markers. The branch where the first tape had been tied? Untouched. No tape. No paper trail. No evidence of knots or pressure. The tree even looked different. Firmer, closer to vertical. Like it hadn't been near the path to begin with. Like it had shifted. He stood still for a long moment. Camera on his shoulder. Not filming. Just feeling. His breath slowed, trial by instinct. The skin behind his ears began to itch. Not sharp. Just a faint crawl, like someone was watching through branches too dense to name. A gust moved through the corridor. But nothing rustled. Nothing reacted. 10 minutes later, he found the third flag already in place. Except he hadn't tied it. He hadn't visited this tree. And yet, there it was, standard tape knot, low branch, fresh pull marks where the tape rubbed against the bark. Almost mirrored to his first one. Except this time, it had a name written on it, faded in black ink. Travers' no first name. No context. Just Travers. Not his writing. Not his tape. Elliot checked his roll. All unused. The implications didn't land cleanly in his chest. They crept. He didn't move. Didn't cry out. Just stood and listened. And the silence around him wasn't passive anymore. It was participating. He walked on. Another 15 minutes. Each step accompanied by the sense of confirming something pre-laid. Roots didn't tangle him. Wind didn't resist him. The trail grew more certain the more he walked, like it had already recorded this route. When he stopped again, he heard it. Just once. A knock. Far off. Not a branch falling. Not a boot misstep. A singular knock, like knuckles on wood, emanating from somewhere deeper in. He looked behind him, scanning for his backmarker tree. The flag there was no longer visible. And next to where it had been stood a new smaller cairn, 7 stones high. Balanced. Recent. Tucked between the middle stones, a folded shredding of flannel. Red. He didn't touch it. No one passed him on that route. No sounds trailed him. No drones overhead. By noon, it wasn't just the trail counting him. He was counting it back. 13 visible stones. 5 forkless turns. 2 missing flags. 1 knock. 0 animals. The forest didn't feel dead. It felt focused. That night back at the cabin, Elliot didn't speak. Didn't write. Didn't sleep. Instead, he laid out each piece of gear in front of him like offerings. He touched the GPS unit, still dead. Opened his notebook. Drew the trail. Memory first. No exact measurements. Just a line. Pure instinct. It curled more than he remembered. Formed a slow bend. Then another. And another. By the time his pencil left the page, the path had recreated something he didn't expect. A spiral. Not looping. No center. Just a continuation inward. And scrawled, in different graphite near the page corner. He swore it hadn't been there earlier. It watches back. There's something different about fear when it doesn't hit all at once. Elliot hadn't seen anything chasing him. No animal. No figure. Not a single unnatural noise since the knock. But the repeats, that's what started to erode the calm. 1 flag vanishing was odd. 2. He tried to rationalize. Strong wind. Animals. But now the trail itself seemed to be responding. Not aggressively. Not maliciously. Just intelligently. The third cairn appeared on his second morning. Same formula. 7 stones, perfectly balanced. Same height. No tumble marks. Except this time, it had something added. Tucked between the rocks was a narrow red ribbon. Worn. Sun-bleached at the edges. Handwritten words in faded black marker barely visible along the long side. Elliot unfolded it, careful not to tug too hard. The cloth nearly tore from age. The writing read, "If you hear your name, don't answer." He stared at it. The handwriting wasn't his father's. He'd seen David's journal entries. His map labels. Measured, crisp characters. This was rushed. Fearful. Still, someone had left it for someone. Maybe for him. He looked toward the next fork in the trail. The path had split, but only on one side was there a small ridge cut so cleanly, it looked swept. You expect certain things in the woods. Wind. Sounds. Rain. But Elliot was beginning to notice something new. Consistency and absence. No birds. No buzz of flies. Not a single mosquito in early autumn. Nature doesn't stop calling in every direction. Unless it's been taught not to. A page from his father's notebook came to mind. A line hastily scrawled in the margins beside a tree sketch. Nothing goes beyond the third cairn. Not even the sound. Elliot followed the path uphill. Around one curve, a large arching cedar tree leaned across the corridor like a raised brow. That's when the second sign arrived. Carved into bark, not with a knife, but something wider, blunt but deliberate. An X. Below it, the initials DT. His father's. Not as ink. Not as chalk. But cut. A final message. Or a territorial mark. It didn't look like it had been added to the trail. It looked like it had always been part of it. As if the trail itself had grown around the mark. Elliot moved forward anyway. He began to notice a pattern. Every stretch of 700 to 750 steps would match the last. Same tree lean. Same moss pattern. Same color shift in the soil. Followed by another cairn. Another flag. Another anomaly. By the third time he realized he was walking past the same arching cedar. He knew it wasn't a loop. It was a spiral. He was being drawn inward. On the fourth cairn, there was another ribbon. This one bled through with water damage. Just one word could still be read. Counted. He spoke it aloud once, and startled himself. The word felt too heavy in the space. Like it shouldn't echo, and did anyway. Far off, the forest briefly creaked. A creak without wind. In the days earlier, before he began the hike, a retired ranger in town had muttered something strange, half senseless, half forgotten. Rules don't work in there like you'd like them to. The place, it doesn't hate you. It's just efficient. Efficient remembers things. That same man had drawn a crude map on a napkin, not of trails or rivers or elevation lines. Just 5 little symbols, an ear with an X through it, a spiral, a tree with 2 trunks, a drop of water, a doorframe, standing alone, no walls. When Elliot asked what it meant, the man said, "One for each way it shows itself. You'll know which one's for you sooner or later." At the time, it had sounded like whiskey talk. Now, on the 5th cairn, Elliot saw the same 5 symbols carved into stone. The cairn wasn't stacked like the others. It was arranged in a deliberate spiral shape. A doorframe tall enough to walk through. Made entirely of stone. He didn't go through it. He crouched and grounded his breathing. The spiral motif repeated everywhere now. Bark patterns, lichen shapes, dirt furrows, leaf drop. Every 30 feet, subtle implications of the same form. He tried to backtrack. The moment he turned around, the way behind him had changed. The corridor was still there, but something was gone. The arching cedar no longer leaned. The stone doorframe was behind him, but the spiral stones had collapsed into dust. The trail seemed to shift not just in direction, but in version. About an hour later, Elliot emerged shaking from the brush into a clearing, a wide spread of damp field grass. All too perfect. No sign of breakage or disturbance, but dead center was a single item placed flat on a rock slab. An old compass. Wooden casing. Brass face. Its dial spun lazily. It wasn't his. Wasn't his father's, either. An initial was carved into the underside. LL legend said decades earlier, a geologist assistant, Leif Landon, had gone missing in these woods. No record of the trail even being there at the time. His reports had focused on magnetic interference before he had vanished indefinitely mid-excursion. The compass winked in the sunlight, turning once more, and stopped. Not north, just center, back toward where Elliot had come. The temperature dropped. No wind, just stillness, like the woods breathed in and held it. A soft knock echoed again. But closer this time. One knock. A pause. 2 more. As if the sequence was figuring him out. Elliot turned slowly in the clearing. This time he did not call out. Not even a whisper. Whatever the trail was doing, it wasn't hunting. It was evaluating. Matching. Counting. In his chest, he felt the truth of it. Not metaphorical, but mechanical, like a ledger balancing itself after someone had interfered. Each step he had taken had been recorded, learned, logged, and now, the place was responding in kind. Mirroring process. Replaying pathways in different versions. Calling his father's name in bark, stone, cloth, and choice. On the 6th cairn, at the base of another spiral ring, there was a note. Not cloth, not carved, just a torn journal fragment tucked into dry moss. Handwriting, unmistakably his father's. Not a trail, a habit, and I've walked too far into it. He read it 3 times. Folded it. Didn't pocket it. Just returned it to the cairn. Because a growing part of him, one that felt less like instinct and more like inheritance, knew the trail wasn't interested in stolen things. Elliot wasn't sure when it shifted. Not the trail, he expected that. Expected the spiral to keep folding in on itself, guiding with repetition until the landscape became more memory than geography. No, what changed was how it watched. It stopped mimicking his movement and started anticipating. Before, the signs came after he acted. A flag replaced, a stone stacked, a tree he'd marked reappearing ahead. Now, the changes were in front of him, waiting. The trees leaned, slightly, uniformly. Their trunks shifted forward the deeper he progressed, curling gently toward the center of the trail like muscles flexed around his spine. The older trees had widened, their rings visible even through patches that shouldn't have barked out. A pressure line ran through them, one Elliot hadn't noticed before. It curved, wrapping, tightening, narrowing. The forest was becoming a corridor. Not naturally, deliberately. He passed 3 more flag markers. They weren't his. Same red cloth, same sturdy knot. But someone, or something, had tied them already ahead of his pace. He approached the 7th cairn cautiously. Same structure. 7 stones. Balanced. But the center stone had a streak of blackened sap across it, shiny, like it hadn't dried even in open air. Across the top, scratched lightly with a blade or nail, were 5 new words. It knows you came back. He didn't touch it, didn't kick it over, just stared. His breathing changed, not from effort, but confusion. Not fear. Recognition. The trail didn't view him as a stranger anymore. It saw him as a return. And something unseen had marked that moment. 30 feet ahead, the corridor opened. Not wide. Precisely. And there it was. A clearing, not empty like a meadow, but constructed. That's how it felt. Rediscovered. Elliot's boots crossed into it before his brain finished registering it. The trees around stopped leaning. They stood motionless now, white-barked where they shouldn't be. Smooth. Too smooth, like sanded driftwood. And strung between tree trunks were lines. Not vines. Not webbing. Hair. Coarse, colorless strands stretched with careful tension between trees, forming geometry. Lattices. One part wove a spiral, tight and purposeful. And in its center, something stood. The shape was upright, but not fixed. Arms too long. One shoulder higher than the other. Its head hung slightly off-axis, tilted, not in questioning, but listening. Its surface wasn't visible. Not obscured, absent. The shape distorted softly, like light through heat. And below it, at its feet, a circle of pressed moss. Fresh. Exact. Waiting. But most disturbingly, the moss curled around the being, not under it. As if it had stepped into a place that had drawn its outline first. Elliot didn't run, which surprised even himself. Somewhere between exhaustion and awe, he simply froze. The figure didn't step, didn't twitch. It moved the way thoughts feel, without sound, without form, only motion. It didn't lurch. It didn't reach. It just condensed a space between where it had been and where it now was. One instant, 20 feet away. The next, 10. Then the bark behind it split, not loudly. Just the sound of dry wood, remembering touch. He finally backed away. Measured. Quiet. No crunch of boots. No broken branch beneath foot. The spiral had prepared for this moment. Edges led cleanly backward. The space had preordained his retreat. But as he turned, the trail didn't look the same. Behind him, the corridor had curved again. No branches marked. No flagging tape. No familiar stones. Just the same openness stretched again. But this time, no presence followed. It didn't need to. Elliot walked faster, then slower, then faster, again, unsure of why he couldn't feel whether he was being pursued or evaluated. Because that's what this was. That's what it had always been. An assessment. A recording. Every step had been measured, matched, reflected in geometry, in cloth, in cairns. And now he had reached the center. Even if it let him leave, he would not be unlabeled. When he found the next flag, it was tied directly to his father's field notebook, pinned low across a tree root, flannel cord through the spiraled edge. Only the last 5 pages remained, and between them, etched into fresh graphite, was a message too neat to be frantic. The trail doesn't trap you. It learns you, and once your pattern fits, it folds you into itself. Beneath that, all in capital letters, the final line, walk back on path what you walked in on. Exactly. A spiral, not a maze. Backtrack by memory, not instinct. Elliot turned again, trying to remember everything. The arching cedar, the 3-stone door cairn, the flannel ribbons, the knot pattern. One pause too. He didn't try to break the trail's pattern. He tried to respect it. And then, the air pressure dropped. Not temperature. Wait. The trees unleaned. Sound returned, but not sound as in birds or wind. Just the forest exhaling. Slow. Like the testing was complete. And when he saw the crooked wooden sign again, aged and weather-stripped, he stopped cold. A warning nailed into the top of a juniper post. If you've been counted, remember not to come again. No punctuation. Just evenly carved bold letters. More for instruction than scare. This wasn't aggression. This was maintenance. A gate closing behind someone who had triggered it gently, rather than broken through. Elliot crossed the invisible threshold back into ranger-recognized wilderness. His GPS flickered alive again. His tooth fillings began to itch. He started hearing the breeze through pine needles again, even if it didn't feel quite right anymore. And just before the woods fully loosened their grip, another knock. Soft. Behind him. Single. Then stillness. Not pursuit. Just punctuation. When he reached the ranger cabin, nothing had changed. Not the light angle. Not the temperature. Not the time of day. And yet hours had passed. Possibly more. When he checked his audio recordings, he found only fragments. But something was buried in the low frequency. Filtered upward, it resolved into words. Pattern identified. Walk complete. Count, 2. He left that night. Didn't speak to rangers. Didn't fill a report. Didn't trace the spiral on any more maps. He only wrote one line in his journal. The spiral wasn't to trap me. It was meant to make me fit. The trail let him go. That's important to say up front. Because not everyone gets that far. Elliot Travers walked out of Pine Hollow on foot. Not injured. Not lost. No broken bones or horror show escape. Just quieter. More aware of where his feet touched the earth. More careful about where they didn't. His return drive down the mountain was unremarkable. Sunny. Empty road. No blown tires. No flickering headlights or writhing trees in the rear view. At least, not then. But what followed, what waited for him back in the ordinary world, would prove something else entirely. Just because you leave a place doesn't mean it stops watching. Especially if you've been counted. Elliot didn't talk about the trail when he came back to Portland. He told friends he'd been out clearing personal grief. Told work he was taking the rest of the month to recover. Told himself he needed a break from the investigation. He didn't even upload any footage. Partly because half his gear had failed again. Choppy audio, glitching video, GPS data corrupted. But mostly because he just couldn't explain it. What do you show someone to prove that a trail noticed you? But things started to happen. Small things at first. The clothes he hiked in, boots, coat, that canvas duffel he carried into Pine Hollow, started developing faint green patterns. Not mold. Clean. Almost geometric. Like moss imitating fingerprints. Twice, he cleaned his boots fully. Detergent, warm water, scrubbed the soles bare. Both times, by morning, a fine film of pine dust had returned. Not from his apartment. Not tracked in from outside. And each time, it gathered in the same place, along the sole, at the outer edge of his left heel. He checked trail camera footage from his own hike again, frames caught just before his camera shut down. In one, standing behind a tree trunk, mostly covered in shadow, was something. He couldn't explain it. Not a figure. Not a person. Just a lean in the shadows. The shape of watching. Not there in the previous frame. Gone in the one that followed. Then the package came. No return address. Hand-delivered. He hadn't ordered anything. Inside, a journal. Not new. Old. Damp at the edges. A covering of river grit beneath a once-sealed Ziploc bag. David Travers' field book. His father's journal. It had been with him when he disappeared. And Elliot had seen it already, hadn't he? At the ranger cabin? He'd read the final pages before his first hike in. But this wasn't the same copy. This one bore new entries toward the back. Some in a slightly altered hand. Similar, but not quite the same as his father's. And the final page was etched, rather than written, scored with deliberate pressure. It remembers patterns. Once it learns yours, it watches the space where you aren't. He boxed it up, locked it away in his closet. And still, the signs returned. Pine needles on his kitchen counter. Scratches on the inside of his apartment door. Low down, near where pine bark might lean if a tree had stood against it overnight. His smoke detector chirped once, even though the battery was brand new. And then there was the photo. He took a picture of his living room one morning, frame test for a home project. Later, while editing, he zoomed in. On the glass of his frame TV, in the reflection, a narrow strip of cloth. Red. Thin. Fluttering like it had been caught mid-turn. No wind. No open doors. Just a moment. And then it was gone. Elliot began dreaming in spirals. Not symbolic ones. Pat's ferns. Old map contours. Every dream wrapped around a center. And at the center was always something he could perceive, but not name. Something with weight. Something that recorded. His dreams always ended with a knock. Sometimes once. Sometimes twice, then a pause. Sometimes with a whisper, not in words, but rhythm, steady, calculated. Waiting. He returned to the ranger station 6 weeks later. No reason except to see if the forest felt the same. It didn't. If anything, it felt even more prepared. The trail wasn't closer, but it wasn't further, either. Not physically. Just emotionally. It felt a little more familiar now. Like a place that had already extended part of itself outward. He left a request for the station to close the area beyond Road 17 until spring. They denied it. Nothing on record hinted at danger. The disappearances remained labeled unrelated. His father's case, still missing, presumed deceased. No cause. No confirmation. No data. But Elliot knew the numbers. He'd been them. They say the trail claims people. He thinks it's different. It keeps people. Not always literally. Sometimes by embedding them. Patterns, habits, footsteps, traits. Into the spiral. Into the behavior of the trail. Like it builds itself in layers. Each visitor contributing one more fold. When he compared his map with his father's again, he saw the overlap. Certain bends matched exactly. Cairns. Changes in air pressure. GPS failure zones. There were 2 spirals, 10 years apart. Laid over each other, they matched with eerie precision. But Elliot's included fewer stones in one section. And in another more. As if the trail had grown. As if it was still learning. He posted nothing online. No blogs. No forum threads. But someone else did. An outdoors-focused Reddit account uploaded trail cam footage from the Pine Hollow sector in January, 3 months after Elliot's last hike. The footage was grainy. But in 3 frames, a figure walks between trees. Then stutters. Frame freeze. Reappears 60 feet away 1 second later. No footprints. No sunk snow. Just the jump. In the comments? No flare. Just speculation. Until someone anonymously replied. Spiral logic. Frame offset. Count incomplete. That account has since been deleted. He heard a final knock on a thunderless morning. 3 distinct taps on his apartment wall. No adjoining neighbor. No plumbing pipes along that section. No reason for it. But when Elliot checked the floor outside, on the hallway carpet, a wet footprint. Human. But wrong. Toes too long. Arch curved like it was still learning how to shape itself around his weight. Facing the door. Not walking past. Just standing. That day, he wrote his conclusions in a sealed envelope. He left it with a friend. The front of the envelope bore 5 words. If it counts you back. Most trails are measured in distance. Elevation gain. Topography. But some trails measure you. Your pace. Just worn practice. They've lived long enough near Pine Hollow to know what not to talk about loudly. Especially when it comes to the trail with no name. But if you stay long enough, listen slowly, and don't push too hard. You'll hear pieces whispered across coffee mugs, told low in trucks, or over folded road maps at the back of gear shops. Rules. Always the same core rules. Spoken with the quiet that people use only when they believe something is still listening. 1. Don't enter after 3 p.m. 2. Don't tie red cloth near moving water. 3. If the forest stops making sound, turn back exactly the way you came. 4. If you hear your name from beyond the trail, don't respond. 5. If your compass spins, stop walking. That's when it's watching. 6. And if you leave, don't leave a piece of yourself behind. Because what gets left might be what invites it forward. There's no posted plaque, no gate or signboard, but there is a tree, crooked, wide-limbed pine just past mile marker 42. And, if you know to look under the bark, you'll find something carved deep, maybe 50 years old now. Don't get counted. 1 round is enough. Rumor says a World War II veteran carved that line after spending a night alone just off the hollow road. No tent, just a bivy sack, a flask, and a notebook. He walked out pale, shivering, and never camped again. He moved 3 states east within the year. Didn't leave a phone number. Burned the notebook. Said he remembered things that hadn't happened yet. Some hikers get obsessed. They track the spiral across trail maps. Overlay GPS pings. Triangulate strange happenstances of silence. They speak of second-hand cases with white-knuckled fascination. The ones who came back wrong. A hunter who no longer casts a shadow at dusk. A child who drew things she never learned. A man who could never again walk in a straight line, even on sidewalks. A biologist whose voice changed slightly after a solo trek. Always 2 tones running just under each other, like audio tracks misaligned. And then there are the footprints. Recorded. Documented. Prints that appear in otherwise untouched mud, midfield, with no start or exit tracks. Footprints of strange proportions. Too long. Too narrow. Like a person stitched from memory, not anatomy. And always barefoot. Even in winter frost or summer gravel scree. Once, a trail runner found a complete set that led up to a tree and ended 2 feet up the trunk, vanishing where bark curls against blunted knots. She doesn't run that section anymore. She says it doesn't matter if you believe the stories. What matters is that they're consistent. One ranger, retired now, told a podcast host off record, "The woods never felt aggressive, but I got a feeling they knew I was leaving every time. Like they paid attention to who ended the walk." He said there are 3 kinds of people that make it out. 1. The ones the trail never noticed. 2. The ones the trail noticed, then let go. 3. And the ones it keeps in pieces. Not dead, not missing, just partially shelved. Still walking sidewalks, ordering coffee, living somewhere. But the woods still owns something small but essential. A thread of instinct, a symbol, a silence, a single remembered pressure of moss that doesn't match any terrain nearby. Elliot Travers doesn't talk about it anymore. He moved again last year. Bought a smaller place on flatter land. No pines within sight line. No state parks nearby. He hasn't worn hiking boots since. But sometimes he'll step outside in the early morning, just before sunrise, and check the air. You can feel it, he says, if the woodline's too quiet, or the fog hugs the trees wrong. You can feel when a place is trying to open itself again. It doesn't matter how far you are from it. Because some trails don't live in one region anymore. They wander, fold themselves through memory. They learn from what they've kept. One night, months after his last sighting, Elliot returned home to find a box sitting in front of his apartment door. No shipping label. Inside, 1 compass. Old. Brass. Spinning slowly. Then it stopped. Not at north. Not at south. But straight toward his front door. And on the box lid? Scratched. Not carved. Just enough to notice under angled light. Were 5 words. You walked a pattern. It learned you. We end the story here. Not because it's finished. How could it be? But because you've heard enough. You've begun to recognize the framework. You felt the hush in your ribcage while hiking, perhaps. Stood quietly beneath pine canopy and found your thoughts suddenly measured, as if the trail was thinking them with you. So here's what matters now, not myth. Not evidence, either. Just memory and caution. Because the trail that counts you doesn't care much for names. Only that something walked its shape long enough for it to understand what you are. And once you're understood, you've already been filed away. Somewhere beneath soil. Between tree rings. In the folds of paths that shouldn't return to where they began, but always do if they want to. Walk soft. Leave clean. Don't tie red. Don't follow spirals in moss. And if something waits at the edge of the woods one morning, don't answer the knock.